Hi, this is a quick demo video of my board game Oak and Iron. So we're going to zoom right in and get right into looking at the bits. Take a look. To win Oak and Iron, you want to achieve at least 4 of the 6 goals before anybody else. And in the case that multiple players achieve 4 goals, the player that achieves the most goals, because you can achieve 5 or 6, wins the game. If those are tied, most money is the tiebreaker. During setup, each of the players is going to pick one of the towns that has a locomotive printed on it to be their home office. You're going to place a town marker there and a marker next to that to indicate that that's a home office. Each player is also going to draft from the supply of tiles a tile for an adjacent space. They're going to place a town on that and have a rail link already built going into that town, and at their home office they're going to have an explorer. Each player has a player mat in their color, and that player mat is used to track what resources they have. You take a look at each town you have, and each town has icons showing resources. At the moment, this player has 1 metal ore, so we're going to move the marker for metal ore up 1. We see 2 cattle, so we're going to move the marker for livestock up 2. We see 1 lumber, so we're going to move the marker for livestock up by 1. If the player had any gears, and here is a gears icon, they would move the gears marker up by 1. The bottom row is income, and the income is always even with the lowest cube. So since gears is at its starting position, income is also there. But suppose the player got 2 gears, moving up the gears marker, then now income would move to 4 to be even again with the lowest marker. Later in the game, towns can be turned into cities. Cities produce 2 of each of their resources. So turning this town into a city would increase the supply of cattle by 1 and increase the supply of lumber by 1. With certain technologies from the tech tree, you can even expand cities by making them even bigger. Each time you expand a city, it adds 1 to each resource on that city. On a player's turn, you either pass or you take an action. And if you take an action, then you come to this board right here. You pick one of the available tiles, you pay from your money the cost of the action, and you flip that action down. So as an example, suppose the player wants to take an exploration action, then the player might pay $200 and use this explorer icon, and we're going to flip that face down. Face down tiles cannot be chosen again for the rest of the round. A player, instead of taking an action, can pass. If a player passes, then they take no more turns in the round, but each time their turn is skipped over, they collect $100. When everyone passes in succession, multiple actions will have been taken. At that point, all of the actions that are taken get set aside. The actions that are left slide down, directly down, to fill the gaps. And then the tiles that were used in the previous turn get mixed up and used to refill the top of the track at random. When you choose an explorer action, you look at the row that shows the explorer icon and you find the number that's just to that side of the cube. So in this case, 5. That means this player would have 5 action points to do explorer actions. Moving an explorer along a rail line is 1 action always. Moving an explorer into an undiscovered tile costs the cost of the more expensive of the 2 terrains. Clear white terrains like this cost 0. Plains down here cost 1. Forests cost 2. Mountains cost 3. So if our explorer wanted to move into here to explore that space, it would cost 3 of the 5 action points. When you explore a new space, you take the top 2 tiles from the available supply and you pick one to put in that space. The other one goes to the bottom of its stack. Now, so far, I've used 3 action points to move from there to there. Another thing that can be done is you can spend an action point to flip an explorer over to its farmer's side and assign that explorer to farm a resource. So by spending 1 action point, I could now be farming that gear right there. And when you farm something, that's the same as having it in a town. You gain 1 of that resource. So that would move up this marker on the gears, and since this is now the lowest marker, income would also move up. For 1 action point, you can also create a new worker. New ones appear in your home city. Now, what if instead of choosing that, suppose you chose the hammer? The hammer is used to activate railway workers and brutes. So again, we're going to take a look at the appropriate row. The row with the hammer has 5 action points. So for 1 action point, I could build a worker, or for 1 action point, I could move one along an existing line. Now, railway workers are the only way that you get to add new rail. Let's suppose that we're starting with it right there. The cost to build new rail is the cost of the tile you're leaving plus the tile you're entering. So remembering that forests cost 2 and mountains cost 3, this railway worker could move from here to here for a cost of 5 action points. And anytime a railway worker moves like that, they leave behind a rail marker. So now that line only costs 1 to move for each player action. Railway workers can also be flipped over to their brute side, and brutes are used to deal with other players' pieces. Suppose a player is here farming this iron. For 1 action point, you can have the brute attack that worker and chase them away back to the owner's supply, and that player would lose that resource. This is important because sneaky players can even farm your own tiles, stealing that resource away from your town or city. And again, brutes are how you make them go away. Suppose that you chose this tile as your action. This tile lets you get discs that can fill in and add to the spaces. You'll notice, for instance, in this town, there is an open circle right there. When you take this action, that lets you draw discs that can fill those spaces. So we're going to go to, supposing that we took that action, we're going to look right here on the mat, on that line, the cube just to the space just to the side of the cube. You see it says 3/1. 3 means how many you draw, 1 is how many you keep. So we're going to draw 3 discs, and out of those 3, pick 1 to keep. So let's suppose that this player wants to have more cattle resource. They would place that there, or they can hold it until later to place it somewhere else, but you're allowed to place them immediately, and return the other 2 to the supply. Since the player has added that cow to their town, their cattle now goes up by 1. If you choose the research action, then you can gain a technology from the tech tree. Looking at this player's research, we see it right here on the row with lumber. The person has 1 research. That means they could pick something that costs 1 and place a marker on it to indicate that they have now gained that technology. And each of these technologies is explained in detail. To gain a level 2, you must not only have the 2 cost in action points, you must also have the previous tech. To gain Join the Union, you must not only have the 3 resource, you must have 2 of the 3 prior techs. So you have to have homesteaders, tunneling, industrial revolution. You have to have 2 of those 3 before you can gain Join the Union. One other option you have is to form a business alliance with another player. When you do this, instead of paying the bank for the action you're taking, you pay that player. Then you take one of the other actions I've described, except instead of using your own player mat, you're using that player's player mat. So for instance, this player is way ahead in cattle. Some player might take that action and pay them in order to use their cattle of 6 action points for exploration actions, rather than having to use their own, which is lower. Another reason to take the business alliance action is maybe the action you want to take is no longer available. All of those have been taken. Then you might be willing to pay another player just for the chance to take that action you really want to take. And that is a quick overview of Oak and Iron. Players keep taking turns until they choose to pass. Once everyone passes, that ends up a round. At the end of a round, we reset the supply of available actions and players collect income. Then we go directly into the next round. The start player of the next round is the player who was first to pass in the previous round. So being first to pass also gives you the right of first pick from the available actions in the new round. Once a player has achieved 4 or more of the objectives, the goals, that ends the game. The player who has the most goals wins the game. In the case of a tie, the player among those who has the most money remaining wins the game. This game plays 2 to 4, and it normally plays in about 60 to 90 minutes. Thank you.